Good afternoon to all participants, and good morning for some of you, or good evening for some of you, because I know that the attendance is from a quite wide geographical areas. And welcome to this webinar that is dedicated to high-risk plants. So the objective of this webinar, that will be divided in two sections, is to help you on the preparation of the pest list through search on the dedicated databases, and to support you in the preparation of the dossier for Momordica. Let me introduce myself and also the other speaker that will present during this webinar. I'm Ciro Gardi. I'm a scientific officer here in EFSA at the plant health team, and I'm coordinating the activity of high-risk plants. Together with me here, Eduardo de la Peña, that introduced now himself. Thank you.
Thank you, Giro. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all attendees. So indeed, I'm also a scientific officer here at EFSA, and I'm working well together with you and with Maria Chiara on this high-risk plants mandate.
Okay, in fact, we have then we will have in later on in 30 minutes time more or less, Maria Chiara Rosacci, that she's a trainee with us in the plant health team, and she will present the part dedicated to Momordica. Now let's give you some practical indication concerning this webinar. So the webinar is being recorded. The webinar, as you can here, is in English, and also the question that you will pose should be in English. One important thing concerning the tool that we are using for attending the webinar, so the software you are using, is concerning the setting. You have a main frame where you can see the presentation we are giving, and then at the bottom of the screen you have a frame that is dedicated to the technical question that could raise during the webinar. So technical question mean if you have a connection problem, if you have audio problems, you can ask inserting text here, asking for support from our technical services. While the most important part of this application is probably the frame that you have on your right side, that is the frame dedicated to the question and answer. In that section, you should enter the eventual question that you have to pose to us, that will be then answered either during the webinar itself or either on a later stage. Now let me give a short outline of the webinar. So in a few moments, I will give a very short and summarized introduction on the high-risk plants and what this category of plants are. And then I will give the floor to Eduardo, who will present the methodology that we propose, that we advise you for creating, for compiling the pest list. So based on database searches, how you can prepare this list. And this will be followed by a question and answer section. After this, there will be the part of the webinar dedicated to Momordica that also will be followed by a question and answer section. One short, as I promised you in introduction, on the high-risk plants, because probably most of you are already familiar. The reason, if you are attending this webinar, you are probably already interested and probably almost ready to submit a dossier. So you know probably that the regulation 2031 of the 2016 defined the new plant health law for the European Union. And in this new plant health law, the Article 42 introduced a concept, a category of plants defined as high-risk plants, that are the plants or the plant product whose introduction into the European Union territory can pose a very high risk of introduction of a dangerous pest. Here in this slide, you can see more in detail how the Commission has regulated further this piece of legislation. So with the implementing regulation 2018 of the 2018, the Commission defined the list of high-risk plants, so all the plants that are going to be regulated, and for which there will be the prohibition of import into the European Union territory starting from the 14th of December of this year, so and pending the risk assessment. With another implementing regulation, the 2018, the Commission defined the methodology in which way the dossier should be prepared by the NPPO, how this dossier should be sent to the European Commission, and how the commodity risk assessment will be then performed. And based on the risk assessment that will be done by EFSA, the risk manager, the European Commission, will take a decision that could be keeping the ban of import, could be withdrawal of the ban of import, or could be even adopting different measures. In this slide, before giving the floor to Edoardo, is further summarized the process with a more focus on what EFSA is doing. So we start, okay, with your application. So the third country, the NPPO of a third country intending to export in Europe one of these plants has to prepare a dossier. How to prepare a dossier is specified in a technical report that has been published by EFSA, and Eduardo will mention further about this technical report. And once the dossier is ready, it should be sent to the European Commission. European Commission, after receiving the dossier, will perform a quick validity check. After the dossier is considered valid, is transferred to EFSA. EFSA at that point, with a dedicated working group, start the commodity assessment, the commodity risk assessment. But if there is in the dossier some lack of information, something is missing, EFSA is entitled to request to the applicant the integration of the information. And so once all the information are provided to EFSA, the commodity risk assessment can be initiated, and then once we conclude the risk assessment with the dedicated working group of experts, we will publish this scientific opinion, and we will transmit this commodity risk assessment to the European Commission for the further step, the further decision. Given that, I think I'm ready to give the floor to you, Eduardo, and that you will explain in detail how to create a pest list.
Thank you very much, Ciro, and thank you for this very nice introduction to the topic. So indeed, my objective the coming minutes is to propose you and to come up with a methodology so you can compile a pest list for a commodity, for any commodity that you want to export, so where you know what to do when you are preparing your dossier. But before going into details, let me frame a little bit the situation. So as Giro explained, EFSA published already a technical report where you can get detailed information on how to prepare this dossier. And actually, I want to tell you, you can, after this webinar, you will be able to download the PowerPoint presentations that you are seeing now. And there you have the links to the references or to the technical reports we are referring to and to the databases we will mention. So please do it, because then you will have direct access. But in this technical report, where we give details of how to prepare a dossier, we tell you what type of details do you have to provide in this in your dossier. And there are three important areas that you have to cover in your dossier. So first of all, you will have to present data and information on the commodity that you are wanting to export to the EU. So what type of plant material you are wanting to export, from which genus or which species, and how you have grown this commodity, this material. Then a second part will deal with the pest potentially associated with your commodity. And then a third part of the dossier will focus on risk mitigation measures. So you probably you are dealing in different ways with potential pests in your country. So we will need to get this information also on your dossier. But today here I'm going to focus mainly on how to prepare, how to get the information so you can determine which are the pests potentially associated with the commodity that you want to export in your country. So our idea and the idea of organizing this webinar is helping the MPPOs from different countries to prepare the dossiers, and particularly to help you to prepare a pest list. So that's a little bit the frame of what I'm going to tell. It's also important, I think, to define what do we mean exactly with pests. Because pest is a quite broad term, so we refer here to any organism that may pose a threat to the commodity or to plants in a given country, and that may come along with your commodity. So we are referring here to insects and mites, to plant parasitic nematodes, but also to fungi and bacteria and viruses that usually in the phytopathological literature are referred as plant diseases. But here, just for the purpose of clarity, we summarize all these different types of organisms under the word pests. So this is what we mean with compile a pest list, to summarizing all these different types of organisms. Also, before getting into details in the search and databases of potential pests associated to your commodity, I would like to cover three general aspects, or give you three pieces of advice that could be interesting for you. We understand that the regulation is at genus level, but we advise you to prepare the dossiers at a species level, because this will really facilitate your work. So you will be more easily find your pests when you do your search at the species level rather than genera, because as you probably know, some genera of plants are very broad, so you will find a lot of information. So this will facilitate your search if you work at the species level. And also it will facilitate our assessment. But of course, you are free to send if you want to dossier at genus level. We encourage you to use the proposed search strategy that is specified in this technical report. So please go back to this technical report of EFSA, where we actually explain also how to do this search. And what is very important when you prepare your dossier is that you give reference of all the pests that you find for your commodity. So we can really trace back the information that you are providing. So this is very important. So be quite thorough and provide this information in your dossier. So these are the three pieces of advice, general pieces of advice that we wanted to give you here from EFSA. But then we will, in the following minutes, just cover more specifically how to do the search of in different databases. And we have done this under two possible scenarios. So we understand that you are working most probably for MPPOs based in different countries. It might be that you have different types of access to different databases. So we decided to give you suggestions taking into account two possible scenarios. When you have access to commercial databases like CAP or the Crop Protection Compendium of CABI or the Web of Science, but also to give you tips when you don't have access to these commercial databases. So in any case, you can also do searches. You can also, there are a number of databases available that will allow you to find pests associated to your commodity. So we will explain in the coming minutes these two possible scenarios. Regardless of the database that you use, you will probably do your search by using a combination of keywords, of search terms in your database. So here in this slide, we propose you a number of possible combinations in which you probably will include first the name, the plant species of your commodity, the botanical name, in this case, Quercus robur, with other search terms like these different types of organisms that are considered pests, like insect pests, mites, plant parasitic nematodes, fungi, bacteria, etc. You may consider, when doing these searches, narrowing down your search to your country or region of origin. Because for some species, you may find so much information that it's not bad to narrow down your search. So these are the general ideas that we wanted to convey, and now we will focus on how to do this search in different databases. So to compile a pest list, we suggest you, we advise you to start by working with the EPO global database. So you can go to this site. Bear in mind that in the PowerPoint presentation, if you download it, you will have access. You can click on the URL, on the hyperlink, and going directly to the site. So we advise you to start by going to the EPO global database, and there you have a search box where you can type in the name of your plant species, the name of your species, and then you will be conducted, or you will be taken to a website for that plant species. Using the example of Quercus robur, the oak, we have here the EPO global database site with information for this plant species. And there is one box with an hyperlink on the left side of the screen where you can see pests. And by clicking there, you will be taken to a data sheet where all the pests that have been reported in EPO for Quercus robur are given. So you can retrieve this information from this database. As I mentioned, you may have access to other commercial or registered-based databases like the Crop Protection Compendium from CAVID. So here, again, you have a search box where you can type in your keywords, your plant species, your commodity, and then you will be conducted, you will be taken to a data sheet where the pest species for that commodity are reported. And you can retrieve and add it to the information that you already collected from the EPO global database. Similarly, you have other potential databases like CapDirect, where you can get access to the abstracts of literature, scientific literature and technical literature published, and by using different keywords, your commodity or other terms, you will get reference of what has been published on that particular commodity. A very broadly used database is the Web of Science. That is also a tool that can be used to search scientific literature. So here again, you can type in your keywords, your search strings, and you can retrieve a number of published articles and technical notes on your commodity, and you can narrow down here your search by looking at geographical, different geographical regions, etc. So it's up to you which keywords do you want to use. So you will collect a number of references, and you can screen this and select the ones you consider relevant for your dossier. So at the end, by doing these searches, you will be able to compile this pest list covering these different groups that we show in these slides. But the other scenario that you may face is you don't have access to certain commercial databases. Still, you can do this search because, as I mentioned, the EPO global database is freely accessible. So if you have an internet connection, you will be able to access the EPO global database and still do your search and retrieve, as I explained before, your pests. So this is again one of the sites that I show you for Quercus robur. You can go to pest and retrieve the pest associated to this commodity. Another alternative, and it's a very, very powerful search machine, is Google Scholar. You probably are familiar with Google that you use to search in internet, but you can use Google Scholar to navigate and to search for scientific literature. This is a very powerful tool. It's freely accessible, and you will get access to many references. So by also, again, typing in or giving certain keywords or certain keyword combination, you will find what's published on that on those topics. Of course, this is a very powerful search machine, so you may have a lot of feeds, you may encounter a lot of references. So we suggest you to install a freeware program, a program that is free accessible, is called Publish or Perish, that can help you to handle the references that you find in Google Scholar. So this is just a reference management program that you can download and can help you to compile the reference list for your pest, for your commodity. There is, so in these last minutes, I want to mention other possibility, regardless of if you have access to commercial databases or not. There are a number of international organizations that keep databases freely accessible, where you can find very relevant information when compiling a pest list. For instance, I give here an example of the World Agroforestry Center that has a database of 3 species, and by searching in this database, you can find information of plant species, and you will often get information of the pests reported for that particular 3 species. Another example is, for instance, this database that is maintained by the University of California at Davis in the United States. They have a database called Nemaplex, where you can find information of nematodes or plant parasitic nematodes and their associated plants. So you will find information of your commodity, which nematodes may occur associated to your plant species, to your commodity. Also, this site, Aphids on World Plants, you can find information, specific information on aphids occurring on plants. So you can search at plant level. So you can give your Quercus robur, the species I use during this presentation as an example, or any other species, and find out which aphid species have been found associated for that particular plant species. The Biological Record Centers in the UK has a very thorough and comprehensive database looking at interactions of phytophagous insects and plants. So again, by using this database, you will find information on potentially your commodity and which insects have been described or found associated with that plant species. The last example that I want to give on specialized databases, and bear in mind that these are freely accessible, is ScaleNet, which is a database focused on scale insects. And again, you can search in this database by plant species name and look at which scale insects have been reported for that particular plant species. And with this, I think I have given you already quite some suggestions, quite some ideas on how to perform this pest list compilation. I would like to end up my presentation by giving you a number of general recommendations. So it's very important that you include in your dossier how have you done this search. So you give details on the methodology used, and in particular, when you have done your search, which keywords, which search strings have you used. So you explain in detail how you have done this, the methodology used, which databases have you searched, where did you retrieve the information. So you give at the end a full reference of the pest you are reporting. And I try to organize the output as specified in the EFSA technical note. And let's say the golden tip or the advice that we can give you is to try to be thorough and provide all the information that you think is relevant for us to assess properly your dossier. And with this, Giro, I think I
excellent,
complete
Eduardo.
my part.
I think you gave an excellent and exhaustive explanation that could be very helpful for the potential applicants. So I hope now, of course, you have still some time to send your question. We have received already some, and we have also some relevant questions that were discussed during the section of this morning, and probably could be worth to rediscuss, to reformulate the answer that we proposed for this question, because I think some of them were quite useful. So one of these questions was if EFSA could provide or would provide any support in the preparation of the dossier. And for this, I can answer directly. Unfortunately, no, we cannot support you directly in the preparation of the dossier, but the support that we can provide is in this way. So organizing webinar, providing also to your feedback in case you have needs of contacting us. You can use the email address that you will see at the end of the presentation, but we cannot support directly in the preparation of the dossier.
Also, all the questions that we received today will be answered, and the answers will be available online. So you will have access to the answers to your questions of today, and also we are also available online. I mean, you can always reach us in our email address, and,
exactly.
So we can provide answers to specific questions that you may mail us.
So then another question posed was concerning the string that can be used, or the syntax that can be used. The question was if the same syntax or same string can be used for any possible database, and I think I give to you this.
Well, so the applicant is completely free to decide which keywords search strings they use in their search. So we gave you some examples today on how to do so by combining the name of the plant species of your commodity and different terms. You may by doing and combining this search to compile a thorough pest list. What is important to bear in mind is, depending on the database, the syntax that you may use may vary. So you may have to adapt the syntax of your search string to different databases. Most probably, if you are using a particular database already, you will know what this syntax is. But bear in mind that these search strings may have to be adapted to different databases. Exactly. What is important, sorry, Giro, is whatever you do, that you keep track. Where did you perform the search and which search terms you used? So
sure,
and you provide this information. Yes.
And another question related to this was already from this morning, was if, for instance, in the example that you provided in the presentation of the string would be sufficient. You can answer, but I would say that these were just examples. So you have to adapt your search string based on the specific needs. But please, Eduardo, if you have something to add on this.
No, I think, as I mentioned, you're very free to use those keywords that you consider relevant. Perhaps I have mentioned several times here using the botanical name of the species. You may consider completing your search by using the vulgar name of the commodity. And it's like Quercus robur, could be pedunculate oak, or could be, so you can eventually fulfill or use these common names also to see whether you can retrieve further information. So that's one.
Yes, so we saw also from our experience when we retrieve pest lists for other species.
Perhaps, Giro, what you could tell that we mentioned this morning is this narrowing down of geographical information. Yes. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit.
Yes, we made the example in the example of string provided. So using the geographical location of your country, eventually to narrow down the search. But please be cautious with this aspect, because especially if your country is a small country for which maybe there are not so many scientific evidence. So if you are going to narrow down using the and the name of your country, you have the risk of limiting too much the pest that you will retrieve. So in that case, please adopt an opposite attitude, that would be maybe to look also to the neighboring country in order to have access to a larger set of evidences. So be cautious with this. And I think we have concluded. There was one question concerning the differences between, in the Easy Web of Science, between the old databases and the core collection.
Yeah. But depending on the type of registration or subscription that you have to the Web of Science, you may have access to different databases. And this may influence the outcome of your search. So if you have a subscription to all databases, you may retrieve more hits, more reference, that you only have access to a limited number of. So that's why it's very important in your description of the methodology you use that you verify and you check what type of access and subscription you have in the Web of Science.
Exactly. I saw also other question on the way, but don't worry. I mean, we managed to answer all the questions either also in written form, and so all the questions will be answered and will be provided and published after the end of this webinar. For the question that we are not managing to answer directly on time now. So with this, I think we have to break for a moment. So, but please hold on. We have this short interruption in order to switch for the following section that will be the one dedicated to Momordica. So we will be back in a few minutes. Thank you for now. Welcome back. We try to manage to be quite fast, less than minutes that I told you would be the break. I hope you are all back with us. And because now we have the second section of the webinar, and I have here with me Chiara, Maria Chiara Rosace, that please, Maria Chiara, introduce yourself a bit.
Thank you, Ciro. So indeed, my name is Maria Chiara, and I am a trainee here at EFSA, working in the plant health team.
Thank you, Maria Chiara. I will give you the floor in a very short. I will just tell that this section, as you know, is dedicated to the preparation of the dossier for Momordica. And Chiara will precise more in detail later on, but just to let you know, probably you are already aware, the dossier for Momordica should be prepared and submitted only by the country that have thrips palmi in their territory. But Chiara will tell you more about this, and so the floor is yours, Chiara.
Thanks very much. So, as Ciro mentioned, I'm going to give you a very, very short presentation on how to prepare dossier for fruits of Momordica. As you know, in fact, Momordica is listed as a high-risk plant in the Commission Implementing Regulation 2018-2019. Actually, Momordica is quite a peculiar case because it's listed in the regulation as a fruit. The reason is because fruits of Momordica are known to host and provide a pathway for the introduction of a very serious pest, which is thrips palmi. So, countries that have thrips palmi located in their area are required to submit a dossier to the European Commission in order to list the risk mitigation measures in place against this pest to allow EFSA to perform a risk assessment. There can actually be cases in which thrips palmi is not present in the country, and in this case it's sufficient to submit an official statement by the National Plant Protection Organization of the country. The same applies in case the production area is located in a pest-free area, according to the ISPM, to the International Standard for Phytosanitary Measures. So in this case, again, you need an official statement by the NPPO of the country declaring that the production place is in a pest-free area. So, what do you need to include in your dossier? You probably already know, because the situation is very similar to the one that applies to the other high-risk plant, but the dossier will be a bit shorter. In fact, Momordica is listed again just for the case of Thrips palmi, for the presence of Thrips palmi. So, in your dossier, you will need to include two different sections. The first one is a commodity description, and you need to follow section 3 of the technical report that was mentioned already by my colleague Eduardo in the previous presentation. And the second section will be a section on risk mitigation measures that you have to compile following the section 5 of the technical report. In this case, you do not have to compile a pest list. So, you need to include in your dossier, as the first page, the checklist that you see in the right side of this slide. But in all the paragraphs belonging to the pest list, you need to tick not provided, because you are not required to compile a pest list, since the only relevant pest, again, is Thrips palmi. Let's go now a little bit more in detail on the information that you have to provide in the different sections of your dossier. So the first one, again, is the commodity data section. In this section, you have to give us the scientific name and taxonomic information of your fruit, the description of the commodity, production period and phenology, so forth and so on. In order to compile this section, you have to follow detailing the section 3 of the technical report, because it will give you lots of tips and advice on how to fill every different part of the section. Just to give you an example, so for the production period and phenology, you need to indicate the period of the year when the commodity is produced and the phenology of the crop. You can also indicate, for example, sowing, planting, flowering, information that can tell us more about your fruits and can help us to assess the risk. Again, you need to describe the general sanitary status and phytosanitary management of the crop in the production area designed for exports. You might also mention if there are differences between the production area designed for exports and other production areas within the country. All of this kind of information may be very useful to us. Second part of your dossier is the part on risk mitigation measures. This is very important to help us assessing the risk, because it will tell us more about the effectiveness of the measures in place in your country against this pest. So it's probably the main section of this dossier related to Momordica fruits. What do you have to include here? You have to include technical data on the efficacy of risk mitigation measures, certification system, surveillance system, handling, packing, exporting procedure. Again, in the section 5 of the technical report, this list is complete and the information that you have to include are always available. Just to give you some examples, in this case as well, you have to describe the risk mitigation measures of the commodity and their effectiveness supporting by evidence. In the appendix of the technical report, there are also some tables that can help you to understand which information you have to include. So please fill in the tables, which will be very helpful for you and will be also very helpful for us. I will give you just a further example on the pesticides case, insecticides. In fact, we also ask you to submit information on the products that you are using against the pest, against Thrips palmi. And we suggest to provide information on the officially approved labels. For example, the active ingredients that you find inside, the application time, the dosage. These information are very useful to us, so please do not hesitate to include them in your dossier. So, as I probably said many times already, but we would like to underline this, please include all the necessary information, as much detailed as possible, in order to help us assess the risk. What happens after you submit your dossier to the European Commission? EFSA will receive the dossier and we will perform the risk assessment evaluating the efficacy of the measures in place in your country against Trips palmi. After this, we will deliver an opinion to the European Commission on the risk that is posed by the export from your country to the European Union. And the European Commission, since it's the risk manager, will take a decision, taking into account, of course, the opinion that will be provided by the European Food Safety Authority. This slide, it's a summary slide telling you what you have to include in the dossier, so some take-home messages. Before submitting the dossier, you have to check that you provided data following Section 3 and Section 5 of the technical report, so the one on commodity data and the other one on risk mitigation measures. You provide any relevant information to help us, to facilitate us in assessing the risk posed by the import of your commodity within the European Union, and you always provided evidence. So this is very important. All the information you provide has to be supported by evidence. If you have any question on this point, do not hesitate to ask in our box. Finally, one more tip. We are going to accept every format you are going to send the dossier. So if you would like to use a USB or a memory stick or a CD-ROM, every format will be accepted. Probably the most common way so far has been sending the dossiers as attachment to an email. And this is probably what we suggest you to do. But in any case, please provide also an index, because this will be very helpful to check if all the documents you want us to have are attached to the email. And with this, I'm finished, so I give back the floor to my colleague Ciro. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara, for the excellent presentation. And as you know, you were entitled already since the beginning of the presentation to pose, to send questions on this. You can continue for some minutes more. And there are a couple of things that I would like to indicate. When, for instance, we speak about a risk mitigation measure, do not focus only on chemical pesticide treatment, but also can be alternative non-chemical treatment. But for instance, also in some cases, there are post-harvest treatment that could be very effective in reducing the probability of having the pest into the exported fruit. And another point that I would stress is that when you provide the information on the cultivation, the more information also on the geographical location of your cultivation area. And if it's possible, also having information on what is the land use or the crop distribution in the area surrounding. This will help us to understand better what could be the potential pressure of the pest on the area, or if there could be no pressure at all, and so on. So I think now we are ready to answer some of the question. And I think, again, also in this case, we have some interesting question from this morning that should be reproposed, because this morning there was, for instance, one question was quite interesting, and was the question was if, for instance, the product exported or imported in the EU is not the fruit of Momordica themselves, but is a byproduct. It's product derived by the transformation of the fruit of Momordica, if the dossier is needed or not. In this case, the answer is not. So if it's another product, if it's a powder or if it's a dried and meshed product obtained from the fruit, in this case, you are not obliged to provide the dossier. Another question, Chiara, was, okay, the other question, if you remember, was that if some country has a plantation that is in the pest-free area, how is the definition of pest-free area? So probably you can refine the answer we provided this morning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to stress on this point because, again, if the production area is not is pest-free, according to the relevant international to the relevant ISPM, so the International Standards on Phytosanitary Measures, you are not required to submit a dossier. The ISPMs that you have to follow are, for example, the number 4, the number 8. They are all about pest-free area. They give a definition of pest-free area, and they also explain the National Plant Protection Organization of the country how you can define a pest-free area, how you can maintain a pest-free area, because of course during the time a pest-free area can also be invaded by the pest, or there can be any kind of problem. So there is a need to maintain a pest-free area as indeed pest-free. So please refer to the ISPMs. So this is what we would like to stress on right now.
Okay, we have another question from Mary, and the question is if there are let me see, if there are other pests, other EU-regulated pests, other than Thrips palmi, if they should submit a dossier or not.
Okay, so again, according to the Commission Implementing Regulation 2018-2019, Momordica is listed between the high-risk plants just for Thrips palmi. So even if you know that there are other regulated pests in your country, European regulated pests, of course, you do not need to indicate them. So again, for the case of Momordica, there is no need to compile a pest list because we are just evaluating the case of Thrips palmi. So thank you for asking this question, but no, there is no need to fill in other pests.
And another just very recent question is from Emma, and Emma, she's asking if this kind of format that we just described, so this kind of slim or reduced dossier form, can be adopted for other commodity. We should say not, because is Momordica the only case on which among these the iris plants that is regulated only with the reference to a specific pest. So in this case, no pest list should be provided. But for the other high-risk plants, you need to prepare, as it was mentioned in the first part of the webinar, you have to prepare the pest list that is an essential component of the dossier. I think we ran out of time, but I would tell the attendee that all the question will be answered in a written form and would be available on the website. And now I would thank also the colleagues that contributed, despite not being on the stage, but the colleagues from Plant Health, so Svetla, Stefano, Irene from AMU, the colleagues from Corsair and Humane, and also our colleagues in the unit, in the Alpha unit, and the colleagues from the European Commission that made possible to also and requested to have this kind of support for the potential applicants. So with this, we thank you very much, and we invite you also to spend 5 more minutes to fill out the evaluation form that you will receive shortly in your inbox. If you have questions, here are indicated the functional email address that you can use for contacting us. And you will find also additional information and additional references and the link to relevant website in the presentation that you can download. So with this, we again thank you for your participation, and we hope to be in contact with you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.